Hey everybody, Jake here, TrendSpider, to go over the weekend video into the last week of April, starting with SPY. And SPY, as well as a lot of the broad market ETFs, really had a nice bounce off of this volume shelf from this March pivot point here. And you can see here using the anchored volume by price and the anchored VWAP from this breakout point here on April 1st, this was definitely level of interest for the price to bounce the entire week. Now on the weekly side of things, you can see here that we do have a pretty tight ascending wedge forming here, and you can see that we are starting to get to the upper parts of this wedge. So if we did want to be alerted anytime the price gets anywhere near the top or the bottom, you know, there are some gaps below that could fill, which would maybe put us down near this lower trend line. You can always just right click, create an alert at this line, add your sensitivity. That's an area around the line, so you don't have to be alerted right at the exact trend line, and set your alerts, and you're good to go into the week ahead, and you don't have to, you know, stare at the screen the entire day. The alerts do a lot of this for you. You just let price action do the work. Now the Qs, going into the Qs, we have you know, quite a bit of gaps below. That's something that is worth noting. If we turn off the volume by price and we turn on the gap snake, you'll see that there are quite a few gaps here, and this is really what makes the gap snake. You'll see that these gaps just all get connected, and I've highlighted them here in red. So we have 4 gaps below, something to keep in mind. Now if we look at the weekly side of things, you'll see here that we have been talking about that upper Bollinger Band on the weekly side of things, but on the monthly Bollinger Band. So we have the weekly chart here, but we have the monthly Bollinger Band overlaid on top of it. And you'll see here, if we did continue up, you know, the 355 to 360 area would be a potential target above. You can easily go in and create an alert at this line as well anytime the price gets around this area, if we do continue up into next week, into the last week of April. Now going into the IWM side of things, this was a really interesting case study this week. One, the fact that we were able to bounce off this volume shelf that was right around the 220, 221 area. But let's turn off the multi-timeframe analysis and turn on the volume by price. This is something that we touched on last weekend's video as well. So if we anchor the volume by price from the COVID lows, you'll see here that this area continues to act as an area of supply. Remember, anytime you have price below or right at this volume shelf, it's going to act as a supply zone. So if we can get above this area, this could act as a nice kind of launch pad for price. And there's a couple examples of this for this video. One of them being the weekly side, or excuse me, the daily side of things here. If we anchor the volume by price from the swing high, you'll see that this initially acted as supply when we broke down through it earlier in the week. Now you'll see here that this area that initially was supply became a base for price to move up off of, and now we have this ascending triangle forming into the week ahead. And really, you know, plenty of time left though to kind of move around through here. So we could easily do one of these and then do this, or we could break down. We'll just have to see what happens. Our job is not to predict, it's just to look at the levels and see where price could go. But in this case, if we do anchor that volume by price, we do really need to get through this volume shelf above to get things going. Now on the DIA side of things, the Dow Jones ETF, something really interesting. If you guys remember the chart from a couple, I think probably a month and a half back, we were talking about this area here on the weekly chart, finally breaking out of it. Now, if you'll notice here, this acted as resistance the last 2 weeks into March, and now this area has acted as support 3 weeks in a row now, testing this area and bouncing off of it on the weekly side of things. On the daily side of things, if we anchor the volume by price from the swing low here, you'll see that you know, this same exact area that we were talking about on SPY was evident here on DIA as well. Just a lot of shares transacted in this area, creating a base for price. So notice here that for pretty much 4 days in a row, we just bounced off this thing either when the price was moving down or bounced up off of it when we were moving up. So Friday, today, when I did this video, you can see that this was a perfect bounce area. Thursday, we pulled back right to this area. Wednesday, we bounced off of it. And then Tuesday, we pulled back and bounced at it. So clearly an important area. Now, one thing to note is we do have a gap below shown by the gap snake. You can see that we also have this volume gap here, which is obviously right in line with the price gap, because if there's a price gap, we know there's no volume going here. And if we anchor from this point in time from March 25th, we know there hasn't been any price action before then, so that's why there's literally no shares holding here. So just a cool case study being able to see technically why are there no shares here using the volume by price. Well, because we have a price gap and there was no price action at that area. So that's something to note on DIA. Moving into the VIX, the VIX is one that did actually fill a gap this week to the upside. Everyone was thinking that this could be a big move for VIX. Not so much. We simply just filled the gap above and continued to melt down. One thing I'll note here on the seasonality side of things, if we look at seasonality, you can just go here, add a new widget, and you'll see seasonality, click done. I want to look at pretty much since the 2016 lows in the market. So if we look at that area, you'll see that, and let's move this over, got the arrow here. You'll see that April only has a 17% win rate. So if we go on the monthly chart, you'll see that April's clearly been a very rough month for those that are long VIX. And you'll see here that going into May, you're not getting much better. You only have a 20% win rate over the last five and a half years. So in this case, not what I would call the most bullish seasonal time of the year for VIX. Definitely a stronger time of the year for the broad markets and SPY. Now going into some of the other broad market ETFs, or not ETFs, sorry, crypto side of things. I mean, at this point, I consider crypto a broad market kind of index, if you will. Or not index, but just a cryptocurrency that really represents risk on, risk off. Now, there was definitely a little risk off going into last night. We had quite a flush, and this is really because we didn't have a lot of volume here. You can see that there's this volume gap, and price was able to move right through this area and bounce right at this January pivot here, which the anchored VWAP didn't catch exactly, but you can see that this volume shelf did, this point of control here. Now on the weekly side of things, you'll see that on the monthly side of things, we're still having trouble breaking through this area. Now, if we go to the weekly side of things, you'll see that this area is the 5.618 extension from the 2019 down to the 2020 low measured move. And you'll see that this area has been a crucial area of resistance for a while. And one thing that I'll mention here, if we anchor seasonality, pretty much starting seasonality from the previous bull market highs in 2017, which was December of 2017, you'll see that May isn't the best performing month. It's actually going to be the worst performing month out of all the months so far of the year, so with a 33% win rate. So not only do we have this failed breakout here and a breakdown, you can see that May isn't the strongest month of the year since the 2017 highs, and you'll see August is definitely the weakest month of the year with a 0% win rate since those bull market highs. Now going into ETHUSD, Ethereum, you'll see here that we do have kind of a similar story here. If we anchor the volume by price from this January pivot here, you'll see we were able to move down pretty quickly through this area highlighted in orange, which was an area where there just wasn't a lot of volume below. So the price is able to move down very quickly. It was able to bounce right at this next volume shelf below. Now, if we did break down again, which, this is a pretty strong move to the upside. Not sure if that's going to be the case, but if we did, this area from around 2000 all the way down to around 1850 would be another gap where price could move down quickly. Now, on the weekly side of things, you'll see that this resistance area has been the 8.618 extension from the measured move here from 2019 to 2020. And you'll see here from those bull market highs, really going into the summer months are not the strongest months of the year for Ethereum. We'll have to see if that plays out with being in such a strong uptrend for crypto, but these are just the hard numbers to take a look at. Going into the last crypto, Dogecoin. Everybody's favorite coin at the moment. Now, one thing we talked about last week was this longer term breakout. You can see that price is trading right at this trend line, right above it. And you'll see here that on the daily side of things, we were really able to bounce right off of this this pivot here from the initial move up to around 9 cents. We pulled back all the way down and flushed to around 4 cents. And so this is where we want to anchor the VWAP. This is where the trend really reversed and we continued to hit higher lows. And you'll see that we barely missed the anchored VWAP. This was a crazy drop. So the anchored VWAP is not always going to be perfect. It's just a general level of interest. And you'll see that we did break down through it about 3 cents below this 18 level. Now, on the seasonality side of things, not too much to talk about here. We just don't have enough data on Dogecoin at this point to really look at the seasonality. So Dogecoin, definitely a huge wick here on Friday's daily candle, and technically something to keep in mind, that if we did drop this quickly in a single day, it can happen again, but a very strong wick here going into the weekend. Going into the individual names that we'll be touching on, Snow is the first one. Snowflake, if we anchor from the swing high here, let's turn off the gap snake. You'll see that we do have quite a base forming here, and you can see that we got this volume shelf forming here. This has been an area where price has really had trouble getting through, acting as supply, but if we do break through this area, we don't have a lot of volume above that would cause kind of some friction for price to move up. So if we get through, let's say, this 243 area, that's when things do start to get a little lower liquidity above, if you will. Not a ton of shares holding above. Now, if we look at the weekly side of things, the anchored VWAP from the all-time high is right around 282 or so. We're trying to flatten out here. We'll see if this does start to flatten out over the next couple weeks. But if we did have a big move up, this area around 282 would be an area of interest above for possibly some supply to come into play. INTC, Intel is another one to definitely keep an eye on. One thing that I did not mention here on Snowflake that's interesting is the fact that if we look at the insider buying here, the insider buying has been quite interesting. You don't see a lot of insider buying on a lot of stocks over the last couple months, but one of them is Snow. And if you look at Snow, you'll see here in early March, Matt Jacobson bought $32.4 million worth of shares. You'll also see here $6.9 million on both of these transactions on March 7th. So there is some insider buying here going on. Obviously, there's also some insider selling, but the fact that we did have a pretty big insider buy, or at least any insider buying, is worth noting going into the rest of the summer. Now, as I mentioned, the next one is Intel, INTC. Big move down today. One thing I'll note here is if we anchor the volume by price from this swing low here in 2020, notice where we bounced today. Right at this volume shelf. Looks very similar, honestly, to Bitcoin. We've got this volume gap below. Price was able to pretty much just skip right down through it. And we finally bounced right at this volume shelf here, highlighted in green. Now, on the weekly side of things, you'll see that last week was a little bit telling here on the weekly side, breaking down through this longer-term support trend line going back since about December of 2020. So, pretty much broke down right through it. If we anchor a VWAP from this candle here, you'll see that we did bounce right at this area as well. So that's something to keep in mind, that we did bounce at the volume shelf and the start of this trend line right at around 58.75 or so. Going into the next stock, SKLZ. This has been a crazy one over the last couple weeks, just melting down and then finally reversing. The main thing I want to touch on for this one is the fact that we did have a blue raindrop reversal, and this was a great case study on that, because what happens here is raindrops are something that are really interesting on the blue raindrop side of things, or purple, whatever you want to call this color. These are setups that generally are most useful when you don't have a lot of blue raindrops forming. If we had a blue raindrop forming 2 or 3 times on the way down, the blue raindrop wouldn't have been that significant. But a lot of the time, blue raindrops can signify a pretty strong reversal in trend, especially when you don't have them very often. Notice here, we had about a 65% move down without seeing a single blue raindrop. And then finally, we had this blue raindrop form. We had one more flush before this absolute huge reversal to the upside. Now, there's been a lot of case studies on this. We did a case study on GE during the COVID crash. GE had the same exact move. It was about a 50% move down. We'll actually go to it real quick and just touch on that. you'll see here if we look at the raindrop side of things during that move down, same exact thing. You had literally no blue raindrops forming during this whole move down. And then finally, we bottom out with a blue raindrop. We have one more little flush, and then we had a really strong bounce after that. This was good for about 25%. So same type of thing here, no blue raindrops forming. Finally, a blue raindrop forms. You have one little flush, and then you have your move up. So SKLZ was just another great example of that, where you did have a blue raindrop reversal after that final capitulation there earlier in the week. Now, if we anchor the volume by price from the swing high, you'll see that we did move up right to this next volume shelf above. Remember, anytime that this price or any price is below these volume shelves, it's initially going to act as a supply zone. That's exactly what happened here, and it's just supply and demand. If you bought here at 18 bucks, you have a drawdown, you get back to break even, you're probably either going to sell out or take some of your position off the table. That adds to the supply. That's why this area becomes a supply zone. Now, on the weekly side of things, just wanted to point out the fact that if you did look at this initial trend line here, I'll just remove this alert, you'll see this trend line has been pretty strong. I mean, since April of 2020, this has acted as support quite a few times. We finally moved down. We didn't get to it. We missed it by about $1. But if you were able to go in and create an alert at this line and add some sensitivity, you would have been able to capture this wick here on the weekly candle. So remember, the sensitivity feature on the alert system is very powerful. Just click touch here. So when the price touches anywhere within this purple area, you'll be alerted. Going into Tdoc. Tdoc is one that has had some trouble breaking through the Ripster moving average clouds. Now, I like to use the 20 and the 50 EMA clouds here. So if we add the 20 and 50 EMA cloud here, you'll see that price has really had trouble getting through this cloud here. And you'll see, that generally, if you do break through this area, you will kind of bounce around and then finally move to the upside. The main thing is seeing that this cloud changes from red to green, which is when the MAs cross, and that's when you have this shorter term moving average crossing above the longer term, and that's when it changes green. But for now, we are trading right at these this cloud here, and really if price can get above it, or if this cloud can start changing to green, which would mean that shorter term moving average crosses above it, that's when we can definitely tell a change in trend. Now, on the weekly side of things, one thing I'll point out here is if we anchor a volume by price from the 2019 lows, you'll see that we have this huge volume shelf forming here. The main thing that we want to kind of look at is the fact that, as we've said multiple times in this video, this area is going to act as supply initially, but if we can get above this area, this could act as a nice base for the price to bounce up to the the area around 235, which acted as resistance multiple times on the way up before kind of melting up through it back in January and February. But if we did break through this shelf, this area above around 235 to 240 would be a potential target above. And remember, we don't have a lot of volume holding above that, so the price could move through it pretty quickly. Going into the last one, this is actually one thing I want to mention here before we move on is the seasonality here. And another thing, the insider trading, hasn't been what I would call incredibly bullish here. You've had a lot of insider selling, but you've had a lot of insider selling going on in almost every stock you're going to look at. So this isn't really out of the ordinary, and I wouldn't pay too much attention to the fact that, there's a ton of selling here because there's been a ton of selling everywhere. So it's not just unique to Tdoc. Now, if we look at the seasonality since 2016, that's really when the market kind of made its next leg up. We anchor this, go to January 2016. You'll see going into the summer months, May and June and even July, all really strong months. You'll see here that April has an 83% win rate. So far for the month of April, we are green for the month, but you'll see here that this candle is solid because we opened up here around 187 and we're currently at 182. However, we're still above last month's close, and so we are green on the month. We'll have to see if we do get a green close to match that seasonality for April, and we'll have to see if we have a strong next couple months matching the seasonality going into the summer. Last one is AMD, and AMD is one that actually, on the analyst side of things is an interesting one. If we go to the widget, which is called Analyst Estimates here, you'll see that over the last year, we've only had 2 sell ratings, and the rest of them have been buy ratings. And if we anchor the volume by price here on the technical side on the daily chart, let me find this, move it over to the swing high. You'll see that we do have a gap above. So if we can get into this gap above, the price can move pretty quickly to this next area above around 87. We'll have to see if we can get that in for next week. Now on the weekly side of things, you'll see here that we are kind of stair-stepping here. And if we continue this pattern, the next stair step would be up. Who knows, maybe to the 120s or the 140s, which would kind of play right into how it's moved over the last couple years. As I mentioned on the analyst rating side of things, we only have 2 sell ratings and 25 buy ratings. We have 11 hold ratings here. So on the analyst side of things, definitely bullishness on more of the institutional level. So we'll have to see if this does play out in the coming months into the rest of the year. So hopefully this weekend video is helpful. Remember, you can try all of these different features out on TrendSpider for 7 days free. We have a free trial, and then you can choose either a monthly or an annual plan to really use this, not only on the technical side of things, but also on the fundamental seasonality side of things, as we talked about today. And if you do enjoy these videos, make sure to like and subscribe. And we do these videos every weekend. And then once we start up the Stock Trading Pit Season 4, you'll be able to get notifications whenever we're about to premiere a show. So everybody have a great weekend. Hopefully everyone has a great rest of the month. Last week going into April here is important to start looking at those weekly candles and monthly candles as they're kind of forming into the month of May. And everybody have a great weekend.